All right, thank you so much, Abraham. So we might have sort of a small or shorter than normal presentation today, just because I don't think we have a ton of participants. Totally understandable. It's in the middle of the day, work day. So I'm just going to go over all of the material that I've put together. And as always, if you have questions or thoughts or feedback, please feel free to email me. My email is lindy@epcollaboration.com. You'll see it listed on some of these slides throughout the presentation. So always feel free to reach out if you have any questions about the material. Before we get started on the material, though, I'm going to ask Abraham to open us up in a prayer, and then we'll rock and roll.
Well, Lindy, yeah, definitely. If everybody doesn't mind joining me in a prayer today, just to open it up and give thanks to the Creator for all of our blessings. Unneth Lana, we come to you in prayer today. Thank you for this day. Thank you for everything we have. Thank you for the opportunity to come together, to share knowledge, and help each other and lift each other up. I pray that you please be with all those who are hurting today, who are ill, who are battling adversity. Please just give them strength and give them comfort. We thank you for the opportunity to continue to share knowledge, even though the pandemic is going on, and just pray that we're all able to have a heart for each other and to help each other out during this time. We thank you for everything, Creator. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Abraham. So today we are talking about volunteer recruitment and management. So this is a topic that I get asked about a lot. The reason I think I get asked about it so much is because people running community organizations, sometimes there's 2 or 3, or maybe just you on your own, 1 or 2, or just singular people that are helping to pull all these things together, and people just need some help. And it is absolutely legitimate that one would say, you know what, I can't do this all on my own. A community organization is not a community organization if just one person is doing all of the work. So people often say, how do I find more people to help out? And this was another question that was asked during conference when we were talking. I did a presentation for our virtual conference just a few weeks ago, where folks were asking about in the process of growing their organization, how do they find folks to help? And that is the whole topic of this presentation today. So here's what specifically we're going to be discussing. First of all, how do we find potential volunteers? Where are these folks? How do you even begin to find more people to help out with what it is that you're doing? How do you actually engage them in your work and keep them coming back for more and getting interested in what it is that you're doing in your community organization? We'll also cover talking how to train your volunteers, how to make sure that folks know what it is that you need from them, and how to make sure that that's communicated clearly, and that you can follow up and continue to do the great work that you're doing. And finally, we'll talk about sort of managing and retaining your volunteers so that you continue to do this great work, and also so that you're sort of training up for leadership for the future. So those are the topics that we'll be discussing. And as always, if you have any questions, definitely pop them in the chat or the Q&A. Both Abraham and I will be checking that throughout the presentation. And as always, I try to keep these pretty engaging and pretty interactive. And I know we have a small audience today, but I do encourage you to go ahead and drop in your questions in the chat or the Q&A. So go ahead and get started here. The number one rule of volunteer management that I always like to preach is that if it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. And part of that is just that if you, for example, heaven forbid, were hit by a bus tomorrow, and you have all this information about your volunteers, who they are, with their phone numbers, their email addresses, ways to get a hold of them, when they come and help you. If only one person in your organization has that information, and you get hit by a bus, or the rapture happens and you're taken up to heaven and everybody's still trying to do the work, that might be sort of a silly analogy. In any case, you want the information to be written down because somebody needs to be able to take that information and move forward. I was recently working with an organization that I work with here locally. It's not a Cherokee Nation organization, but for example, they had all of the people who are supposed to be helping, all these different committee members, and some leadership in the organization changed, and this one person in the previous leadership position had all of the contact information for everyone, and no one else did. And so when they left, it was incredibly difficult to get the information from the person who had it and continue to use it in an effective way. So essentially they lost a ton of their members and a ton of their volunteers because they didn't have a way to get a hold of them. So that's why I say if it isn't written down, it doesn't exist in the context specifically of volunteer management. So it's very important to keep a database. It can be something really simple and small, but make sure that it's shared with someone. The way that I usually suggest organizations do this is through Google Sheets, or do it through an Excel spreadsheet and put it on a Dropbox drive or OneDrive or some sort of cloud-based system that folks can access, that more than one person can access. That way, if there's for example, change in leadership or something like that, everyone can still go through and get the information that they need. So that's just one thing that I like to tell folks is off the bat is it's always important to write things down. Write down the person's name, the way that you can get a hold of them. Usually I have a column for their name and then their phone number and their email address and their mailing address. And then over to the side, I put another column that says, this is the best way to get a hold of them. I know for me, if you text me, I'm always going to respond. It might take me a little bit of time, but it's usually the fastest way to get a hold of me. But if I have a cousin who, if you text her, she just simply doesn't ever answer, and the only way you can get a hold of her is by calling. And I apologize if you can, in the background, you're hearing my dog. She's a little neurotic when trucks or buses or something comes by, and we've probably got a little bit of farm equipment. So I apologize for that. She'll calm down soon, I hope. In any case, make yourself a simple spreadsheet, share it with other members as you start this process, and then you can just add to it as you get more volunteers. So now let's get into it. So how the heck do we even find these people? Here I am saying, hey, be sure to write it down, put it somewhere, but you're like, hey, I don't even know who to put down on there, because I don't know where anybody is. So these are some questions that I like to tell folks to start with as they're thinking about who it is that, how they can find volunteers. So for example, I will start with saying, where am I? Where do I go a lot? Where do I hang out? Where is it that I could go somewhere to meet new people, where new people are, or people that I do know, that I know I can, maybe start engaging with them in my organization. This could be your church. Maybe if you have an office that you're going to in person, you can always start talking to your coworkers, or like my office that I have my office, but then there's a whole building of people who are in very different industries than what I am. And sometimes we'll have annual, get-togethers or something like that. That's a place. Other clubs and associations that you can, that you're involved with, those are different places that you might be able to say, hey, I could talk to these folks about my organization or this program that I have that I'm working on. A particular project or whatever it might be, and start there. Start where you already are and thinking about how you might be able to meet new people or bring people you already know into the project that you're working on. Is there anywhere that your organization currently shows up a lot? For example, I know we have a lot of our at-large organizations, they'll have their monthly meetings or their weekly meetings at local libraries. Is there, or there's a couple of them that actually have Native American centers. I think up in Washington and maybe some of them in California, there's, Native American learning centers or something like that. Are there other organizations that use that space that you might be able to partner with, and get involved with what they're doing? Ask them to get involved with what you're doing. And the last question I've got listed here is, who are our existing partners? Let's say that there's a food bank that you regularly work with, or that your members volunteer with this local food bank. Maybe it's time for some reciprocity, and they can help out with some of the projects or programs that you specifically have going on. So that's where I usually suggest to start making a list of the places that you go, other members of your organization go, or you set up, or you're already partnering with, and make a list of those and find out, when do they meet regularly, and would it be possible for you maybe to go there and set up while they're having folks at their facility, and do a volunteer drive, or just to hand out some information, try to get some contact information for those individuals. So if there's a partnering organization, let's say, that's doing an event, you might ask if it would be appropriate if your organization could set up a table. So maybe like the local, Lions Club is having a festival downtown. I'm just coming up with an example here. You might say, hey, would it be possible if our organization set up a table with a little bit of info, maybe some artwork and some fun stuff, that we can just talk to people about what we do, and ask them if they would like to get involved. Or it can just be purely an information table. And what you want to do is have a sign-up sheet there that would that allows the person to put their name and their best methods of contact, usually phone and or email. Write that down on the sign-in sheet, and then you can give them something, a little token of appreciation. It's sort of an exchange of values, or exchange of goods there. So you also want to determine what information you're looking for. Again, normally that's the name, phone number, and email. And you want to have a decent looking sign-in sheet. Obviously, it's just a piece of paper, but that it's in a nice order, with a space for your name, your phone number, and your email address is always a good place to start. I always remind folks to bring your clipboard and pens. I have a purple clipboard that I take everywhere with me. It's called I call it my lucky clipboard. And it is lucky because every time I use it, I always get volunteers to sign up at events. So maybe you can find your lucky clipboard too. She's been going strong with me for 11 years now. So you can just ask the organizers of a current event, or the organizers of another organization, if you can be at their event, their program, whatever it is that they're doing, to set up and just engage with people. Now, it might make sense that you, of course, start with organizations or entities that already have some similarity to what it is you're doing. You wouldn't, but I think a lot of our organizations here do a lot of different things. So there's not a ton that's, off brand for what you're doing. So then you want it to be sure to be bold when you get ready to ask somebody to volunteer with you. So what that might look like, I think it's very hard for folks sometimes when they're asking folks to sign up, to put your name, your phone number, and your email address on this piece of paper. A lot of people shy away from it, but it's the most important part of getting new volunteers, is to ask them if there's a way that you can stay in contact with them. And all this takes is a little bit of boldness, and it's really, you need to think of it as an opportunity to allow somebody to be involved with your organization. If you just set up a booth somewhere, a table with a sign-in sheet, and you don't talk to those folks, they're probably, and you just say, I'm with the, Central Indiana Cherokee Community Organization, and people are going to go, okay, they'll probably say, yeah, my great grandmother's Cherokee too, and maybe it'll end there. But you want to be bold and ask them for their email address and say, I'm with the Central Indiana Cherokee Organization. Here are some of the great things that we do. We'd love to be able to stay in touch with you and tell you more about that. Would you, mind? Will you please sign up, and we'll send you periodic emails. And really it's an easy question. I always suggest folks to start out with the people in their organization and kind of go through a role playing where you ask somebody to just sign up. It's an easy question, but sometimes it's really hard to get folks to do this. I've been a volunteer coordinator before, and it's something that you just kind of have to get used to. The first couple of times you ask someone to sign up on your list of folks that you will be following up with, it can be a little bit intimidating. But if you're just bold and you ask it once or twice, then the next few times that you ask it, it'll get easier and easier. So once you have the person's information, once you've gotten it from another event or from someone in the office, you want to follow up with them. So I always suggest that, as you've gone through, you've made a sign-in sheet, people have handwritten on that sign-in sheet, type it up, go back to that Google Sheets that you've created and you've shared with your organization members, and just type it all up. This saves you a lot of time in the long run. It might take a little bit of time in the moment to just type it up, but it's so critical, because otherwise, it'll get set on your kitchen table and then it'll get shuffled in with some mail, and before you know it, it's missing and you can't find it. Or this one piece of paper gets copied and, sent over to another person, and, maybe you can't read the handwriting or something like that. So it's always just a good idea to just, as soon as you have the information from someone that you have asked to sign up, just type it up. Just take a few minutes and type it up. And trust me, that'll save you lots of headache down the road. Know where that document is. If Google Sheets, for example, isn't your best way to manage data, then use an Excel spreadsheet and or put it in the Dropbox. Wherever it is that it seems most useful to you, that's where it needs to be. And you need to know where it is, and other members of your organization need to know where it is. Then the next two, excuse me, I need to take a drink. Excuse me, just had a little something in my throat. The next thing that you want to do is actually follow up with these individuals that you've now made contact with. So I do this through phone calls and or emails. What this does is it shows the person that you're reaching out to that you care and you appreciate that they actually signed up to get more information about your organization, that they signed up to possibly help out with the events that you're doing or the programs and projects that you're working on. What this also does is it helps you to gauge how long it's going to take you to call your volunteers once you have a specific project or program or an event or an initiative that you want to help with. You'll just sort of get an idea for, okay, this is how long this task will take me. But what this does, it shows the other person that, hey, we mean business. We didn't just we didn't simply have you sign up and you're never going to hear from us again. Like, we're serious about this. We have great projects that are happening. We'd love to get you involved. So it's always a good idea to kind of write down a script and say, hey, this is Lindi Conover. We met at the Lions Club Festival downtown. You wrote down your name and number. I just wanted to say thank you so much for expressing interest, and we'd love to stay in touch with you as we have projects or programs coming up. And that just builds a relationship, and it's a component of how you grow your organization, whether or not you specifically need them to volunteer right away for something. And again, these are just some questions to think through. If you're doing like volunteer recruitment for a specific project, let's say that you've got the Chiefs picnic coming up, and that takes 35 people, all hands on deck, and we just need more people to help out with that. Then you might, while you're talking to them or while you're following up with those folks, you might say, hey, we've got this great opportunity to have people help. The chief of Cherokee Nation is going to be there. You'll be able to meet other members. We'd love to have you participate in that. Are you available for that? That would be something where you have a specific ask ready for them. Or if you are just making a new connection, that would just be more of a conversation that you have with the person. Just says, thank you so much for, expressing your interest. We'd love to get you more involved and we'll be in touch. But either way, it shows them that you really mean business and that you actually want to have their help in a project or program. So here's the thing that I see organizations sometimes fumble with. They don't have a very specific ask for a volunteer. So they'll just say, hey, do you want to volunteer with our organization? Like 9 times out of 10, people are going to say no. Like, I don't want to just volunteer. Like, volunteering, maybe the folks who are watching this, we're civic minded folks. And so when people say, I need you to help volunteer for something, the folks watching this might say yes, but the average person, they hear the word volunteer and they think work that I'm not getting paid for. This isn't, necessarily going to be a ton of fun. But when you say something very specific, people are a lot more likely to envision themselves helping out in a specific way. So this is why I write this down here and inventory your what, who, when, where, why, and how. How is it that you want a specific person to get involved with your organization? So those are 2 different questions. Let's just use the Chiefs picnic, annual picnic. And unfortunately, I know we haven't been able to have those a lot recently just due to the pandemic, but in the spirit of optimism and looking optimistically into the future, let's go ahead and use that. So let's say you've got this Chiefs picnic coming up. And again, it's going to take 35 people, all hands on deck, to pull this thing off without any major hiccups. And what is that means, starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're going to have to start cooking hog fry at the local event center. So write all of that down. What exactly is the event or project or program that we're working on? Who all is already involved? Who has signed up to do what tasks? You make it very clear as you're planning this out what tasks need to be accomplished. Is it, obviously you're gonna have a few people working in the kitchen on hog fry. There's going to be somebody who needs to direct folks as they're coming in with the sides. And probably somebody helping to manage, where people are going to be set up. You'll have to have a setup crew, a cleanup crew, just list all of the different possible things that you're going to need help with that day. And maybe, if it's a major event like that, we show up there and we're there for 3 hours, but oftentimes there's, 5 or 6 hours that goes on of help that goes on before, and there's at least 1 or 2 hours afterward of cleanup that needs to take place. So it can be an all-day event, and you might have people who want to get involved, but they're not able to, give up their entire Saturday or Sunday to be a part of this. So instead, what we can say is, we need specific help in the kitchen from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Can you help with making the hog or cutting the meat or, something like that? So getting really specific about what it is that you want a volunteer to do. Sometimes if I'm doing locally around here, like an initiative, like a ballot initiative, for example, we know we have 8,000 doors in our county that we need to knock on to talk to the people in the community. And you can break that down and get it more and more narrow, so that I can go up to Samantha and say, Samantha, I need your help on Thursday night between 5 and 7 p.m. to knock 25 doors and tell people about the solar panel initiative that we're working on. Can you help with that? That is a much more specific ask than, can you volunteer with our solar panel initiative, for example? And that, then Samantha knows I'm going to be working from this time to this time on this day, doing this very specific thing. That is right there is sort of the number one thing that I see organizations faltering with for volunteers, is not being specific about what it is that they need help with. And when you can get specific about it by inventorying all of these things and then asking people to take over pieces of it, it's a lot easier for you to get help with that. So I'm going to move on and we'll kind of circle back to that. So this is, earlier I said you've got to be bold when you're meeting a volunteer and you're asking them to sign up to be kept in contact with. That's a bold ask. But when you're actually asking them to do something, that ask is even a little bit bolder. You've got to say, again, Samantha, I need you on Thursday between 5 and 7 p.m. And this is what we're going to be doing. I'm going to have a script for you. I'll give you exactly the list of the homes that we need to visit. They get an idea. They can actually begin to picture themselves doing that. And it's a lot harder for them to say no at that point. So again, there's some boldness that is involved with this, but in the end, you can remember, this is about our community organization trying to do something good for those around us. And I often find that when I remember that, I can realign with my bigger vision and my bigger goals, and that makes it a little bit more comfortable to ask. Some of the things that you might keep in mind when you are asking them to help out with a specific task or project or program is just make it seem like the world depends on them. This is a really effective way to get folks to volunteer. Let's take the Chiefs example, and I'll break that down and show you what that might look like. So I might call up Abraham and say, Abraham, we've got this Chiefs picnic on Saturday, and it's an all-day event. But we're just absolutely overwhelmed with the amount of work that needs to be done. And we are just going to need a strong guy who can help us put the tables up and tear down. And so we're going to have the tables that need to be put up between 10 and 11 in the morning. And then we're going to need to tear them down between 3 and 5 in the evening. And we just need, a strong guy who can help coordinate that and make sure that all the chairs are put up and everything's cleaned up. Can you help with that? If we don't have somebody here to help us with this, our little old lady cooks are going to be having to work overtime, and they've all been spending their whole weekend. We really need you to help with this. Can we count on you to help us with this task? And just make it like this is the most important thing in the entire world, is setting up these tables and chairs and helping us to tear down. We want to make sure this thing looks great for the chief. We want to put our best foot forward and help grow our organization. And Abraham, you're the only one who can help us with that. And so then you kind of got him on the hook. He's got a special set of skills, and he knows how to do this. He's the guy for this job. Again, that's another tactic that you can use that helps people to say yes, to get the yes out of somebody so that they'll actually volunteer for the specific thing you've asked them to do. You might, when you're talking to your potential volunteers, you also want to make a connection with them. If you've met someone you've never knew before, and you've got them on this call list that you need to go through, make that connection with them. Say, hey, Abraham, this is Lindi Conover. We met at the Lions Club Festival downtown last weekend, and you signed up for our to be involved with our organization, and I'm just reaching out to you to let you know a little bit about what it is that we do, and see what your interests are. And you make that connection with them. And I always write down maybe just a couple of notes. Maybe Abraham tells me, I work with Cherokee Nation CCO group, and he's an artist in this field, and that's why he was interested in signing up for a volunteer list. And so I might make notes in the little database that Abraham is an artist and he does this, and this is why he was interested in that. And then one of the things that's really good about having that information is if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need an artist or someone with that particular set of skills, then you can always go back and say, hey, we looked at our volunteer database and we see that these, there are these sets of skills and we need someone to do this. I see that there's there was just something in the chat. Robin just said, thanks so much for this information. She has to head out, and she wants to know if we'll share the recording. The answer is yes. This recording will be available on Cherokee Nation's YouTube channel, and we'll probably pop that into the into the Facebook page when we're done. So Rob, oh, I'm sorry, it's not Robin, it's Pamela Robbins. I'm sorry, I misread that. Pam, thanks so much for being here. I hope you have a good day. And definitely check out the full recording when it's done. Just keep an eye on the Facebook page or the YouTube channel. So it's always good to make a connection when you're introducing your organization to volunteers. As I had said, you want to ask the potential volunteer exactly what it is that you need them to do without giving them a chance to say no. Sometimes this probably doesn't apply as much to our at-large organizations who are meeting for specific periods of time. But I've worked, for example, with libraries, and they need certain blocks of the time, certain time blocks of the day where they need additional support. Like there are kids coming for after school programs, and they just need some extra hands on deck there. And, that's like Monday through Friday from about 2:45 to 5:30. Kids are coming to the library at that time, and we just want, some extra resources on hand. And so if that was the case, I would say, hey, Stephanie, this is Lindi Conover. As you know, we're doing this after school reading program at the library Monday through Friday. We really need help with the younger children, the K through second grade reading program. I know you've expressed interest in this before. What works best for you to be there between 3 and 5? Does Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday work better for you? So you're posing the question in such a way that they don't have an opportunity to say, no, I can't do it. So that's the difference between the question of, hey, Stephanie, we're running a after school reading program for elementary students. Can you help? Can you volunteer? And that is so vague, and it doesn't allow the volunteer to picture themselves doing something. They don't really know what they're getting themselves into. So instead, it's a very specific ask. Hey, Stephanie, this is Lindi. As you know, we're doing the after school reading program. We need a slot filled on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday between 3 and 5. Which day can you pick up? So those are, again, very different asks there, and you don't really give the person a chance to say no. You've got them on the hook already. The other thing that I was taught when I first started doing volunteer coordinating was just to be not enthusiastic. Embody enthusiasm, embody everything that's exciting about this. The last thing that you want to do is to show up to something where there's a bunch of, boring people who aren't excited about being there, and everybody's complaining about, the world and the state of affairs. That's not what, our Cherokee Nation organizations are all about. It's about, being excited about these different programs that you have going on. And so when you're recruiting folks, when you're talking to potential volunteers, you want to be enthusiasm and just let that overflow with who you are. I know that comes a little more easy to some people than to others. People tell me all the time, like, oh, now I'm excited to do something because you were so excited to. But I think we all have the capacity to bring that to the table. Go to the next one. Okay, so again, breaking down the big ask, we want to be specific in what it is very specifically you want them to do. What is the action you're asking them to be a part of? When do you need them? You want to be specific about the day, the time, the location. So this is number 3, where they need to go. And that could be, you might want to say, we're going to be on the 3rd floor of the library in room 3A, not just the library at 6 p.m. You be as specific as you possibly can. If you're doing a Chiefs picnic, hey, we're going to be at the Anderson Event Center, and we're going to be on, in this specific room, but really I need your help in the kitchen. So you're being, again, really specific with where they're going to be doing the work. And then you also want to let them know how it is that they're going to help. Is it cutting up the hog meat? Is it doing the tables and chairs? Is it being a greeter? Is it, watching the sign-in sheet as others come in? Just being really specific with what it is that they're going to do. Because again, that helps the volunteer envision what their day is going to look like, and they're much more likely to actually show up and do the work and have a good time doing it. And it gives them a chance to see what this is going to be like and how they're going to be involved with your organization. I always think it is 100% worth somebody's time in the organization to call the day before their scheduled volunteer event and confirm with them that they're going to be there. I think the study, I'm not exactly sure, but there's been studies done on volunteerism, and people are literally like 4 or 5 times more likely to actually show up if you call the night before and confirm with them, or call, within 24 hours. So it could be early that morning if it's an event happening later that night. And that also gives you a chance to talk to the person. And if they say no, you have a chance, say, oh, something came up, or I'm really behind on my homework, I've got to study for a test, I didn't anticipate this. Then you give yourself a little bit of time to find a replacement or plan for the problem that has arisen. So I always, and again, it helps you to know that your volunteers are actually going to show up. One of the things that I do sometimes, if let's say somebody doesn't show up, especially if it's somebody that I'm counting on consistently over time, I'll call them afterward and say, or, 30 minutes late, I'll give them a call and say, oh my gosh, Jean, I thought you were going to be here at 12:30. It's 1 o'clock now. I'm really concerned. It's not like you to not show up. Are you okay? And again, what that shows is a couple of things. First of all, you really do want to make sure that Jean's doing okay, that they're not, their car didn't break down and they got a flat tire or something terrible has happened to them. But it also shows them that you care, like you really do care, and that you were counting on them. It's okay to hold people responsible and accountable for the things that they agreed to do. So that's just a little tip for those who are consistent about doing this work, is to follow up with people before the event. That makes sure they're more likely to show up, and then follow up with them afterward if they didn't show up, and just make sure everything's okay. I don't usually like to dabble in guilt, but it is sort of a guilt trip that allows that can work to your benefit. So here's the number 2 rule of volunteer management. Keep them busy. There's nothing worse than showing up to something and not having something for your volunteers to do. You've asked them to take the time out of their busy day, and they said, yeah, I want to come, and then they show up and you have nothing for them to do. There's nothing worse than that. I think if you're doing a project, a program, an initiative, an event where there's going to be lots of volunteers there, it always makes sense in my mind to have one person whose job is just to coordinate all of the volunteers. And because that is what helps to keep them busy. You could just get them plugged in, and then they can go. I've done that before, where I've shown up places and, I think, okay, this is going to be fun, or somebody that I really like and care about is doing, and I want to be a part of it. And I show up and there's nothing happening, and I just stand around for 2 hours. That's not a good look for your organization. And then the other thing is that they say, well, hey, last time I showed up, I just sat around for 2 hours and I didn't do anything. It wasn't a good use of my time. And so when that happens, they're less likely to come back. So that's why you always have to keep them busy. Know your needs. This goes back to inventory what it is that you're going to have them do. You need to know exactly everything that is going to need to happen in whatever volunteer effort that you're asking them to do. I'm give an example here. The Cherokee Nation CCO conference, one of the things that the staff there does that's excellent is they, since we've done it virtually, people aren't able to get their grab bags while they're in person like we've done before. So instead, CCO has done an incredible job of making sure that all of the packages, everyone who registers receives a package in the mail. That takes a lot of time to put all of those things in a little box and then take them over to FedEx and get them mailed off. So in this case, what I'm sure Kevin and Abraham and Savannah and Tammy and the whole crew did was sit here and say, okay, here's everything that needs to go. There's like a checklist of everything that needs to go in these boxes. They need to get packed, they need to get labeled, and then somebody needs to take them to the shipping store. So you have made a list of everything that it is that you need. And you want to then prepare yourself to make sure that that there's sort of a factory line of people, dropping these different pieces of the package into the box. You want to break it down really seamlessly as to what it is that your volunteers are going to be doing, and then prepare yourself to teach them as they come in what it is that they're necessarily going to be doing. You can get creative with what this looks like and condense extra work so that your volunteers are being effective with what it is that they're doing. So you want to keep them busy, and you can do that by knowing exactly what it is that you need. Sometimes when I run a volunteer office and people, it's sort of like an all volunteer office, like in the, like a civic center locally. We have things that we know have to be done every single day. There's, data entry that has to happen. There might be, somebody needs to clean the bathroom. Somebody needs to make sure that the kitchen's nice and tidy, that there's, no gross food in the refrigerator. And so we have an ongoing list just on a marker board of everything that could be done at any given time. So if you do just have a volunteer drop in, then you can say, oh, hey, nobody's cleaned out the refrigerator today. Do you want to go ahead and do that? So there's always something for people to do. And if your organization might not be running something like a civic center where people come all the time, but the important take home there is to know exactly what it is that you need and to list it so that you can quickly look at that list and put that with volunteers that have come to help. Okay, so I'm going to go over a couple of different ways that we can train volunteers. For something that is a repetitive and ongoing task, that's kind of like what I was talking about with the marker board. You want to be clear in what it is that your expectation, be clear in what your expectations of the volunteer are. So if we have someone doing data entry, I would, show them the database that we're working on, for example, and say, hey, here's the information that needs to be put in the database, and here's how this works. And, we expect that we expect you to enter this data correctly and appropriately. So you give yourself ample time to teach them. You show them around the database and everything that they need to know, but without giving them too much information. And then I usually show them what we're doing. And then I say, I'm going to show you how to do this a couple times. And then I'm going to watch you do it. And then I'm going to let you go do your thing. And then in, a few minutes, I'll come check in and see how you're doing. That's the best way to do it. And that is also a way that you can, show someone how to do it, watch them do them, let them try it. And then you can start on another volunteer and work with them and say, okay, do the same process for whatever the task is that you've got them working on. Then go back to the first volunteer and check in with them. Hey, how did that go? What questions do you have? And you can ask for periodic reports sometimes. So if you've got like if I was doing data entry, for example, I had a volunteer working on some data entry project, I might come in, every hour and just say, hey, how many have you been able to, how many have you been able to enter in the last hour? And they'll say, I've been able to enter 45, whatever it is that you're doing. Say, okay, that's great. What questions do you have? Any problems that you're coming across, anything like that. If it's something that maybe they're doing, is a longer term thing, and it's not just, I've come in for a couple hours to do data entry, but it's sort of this like larger project, maybe it makes more sense to ask for reports once a week or once a month or something along those lines. And you'll understand, that just depends on the specific ask that you're, the task that you've got the volunteer working on. So, If you're working with just a one-time specific task with like multiple people, this might be something like the Chief's Picnic, where you've got to teach somebody for the first time how to make hog fry. I usually keep a little checklist. I'm a big lister. I like to keep checklists because sometimes if I've got all these different things that I'm trying to manage, I can lose my train of thought pretty easily. So instead, I just have a guide or a map to help you stay on task. And you want to give yourself enough time to show everyone their task. So like, let's just think about this for a second. If you were doing the Chief's Picnic and you knew that all of the meat needed to be cooked by noon and needed to be in the hot pan so it's staying warm, but you know it all needs to be done by noon, and you know that all the pounds of hog meat that you're cooking up are going to take 3 hours total to cook, but you want to make sure that you give yourself an hour at the beginning to teach people exactly how to cut the meat, how, give yourself a little bit of room for some trial and error. So that's what I'm talking about when I say, like, give yourself enough time to show everybody their task. If it needs to be done in 3 hours, you probably want to start training them 4 hours ahead of time, just so that you know that there's enough time for people to learn the task. And then this last bullet point here, the compliment sandwich. I'm sure you've heard this, whether it's been in volunteer work or business. When you're working with volunteers, you always want to be really encouraging. Like I was saying, you want to be enthusiasm. But one way that you can encourage volunteers is to give them the compliment sandwich. So if you see something that like maybe could be improved with what they're doing, you can say, hey, you did this really, really well. I'd like to give you a little bit of feedback on how you can improve this thing a little bit better. And I also think it's really excellent that you do this other thing. So you've got a compliment on one side, and then a correction in the middle, and a compliment on the other side. So if, again, hog meat, maybe you're in there cooking, and you notice maybe they're cutting up the meat and they're putting it in the pot, and the chunks are maybe a little bit too small. You notice they're getting a little too crispy, but this person is doing a really good job of getting them out of the bucket on time, getting them out of the pan on the time. So you could say, you know what, Joellen, you are doing an excellent job of getting those, quickly getting the meat into the pan. I would suggest that maybe you could cut your pieces just a little bit bigger, maybe closer to a 1/2 inch, because that allows them to cook more evenly. But again, I think the way that you are actually cooking once they're in the pan and just letting them boil is great. So you've kind of gotten a compliment on either end with a correction in the middle. And that's a really good way to communicate with volunteers and let them know that you do appreciate the work they're doing. So another volunteer activity that a lot of the organizations that we're working with are involved in are board members. And so I just wanted to touch on this because being a board member is a very different kind of volunteer than asking someone to volunteer for a specific event or a program or a project that you have. So when you're working with board members, I always say that it's important to be clear in the expectations by creating some sort of a job description that says, hey, we meet, once a month on these days. This is what we expect of you. This is, we want you to be able to attend. You're required to attend, 2 out of every 3 board meetings, and you can't miss more than 3 at a time, because then you're not really doing your job. Just be very clear in what those expectations are. I was just working with a local organization here, and again, they had there was the sort of central committee, the board member, and they had all these little subcommittees, and the chairman said to me, none of the committee people are doing their jobs. And he said, well, have you told them what their job is? And he's like, well, they should just know. And I said, well, why would they just know? That's not something you just, like, you're born with knowing what your expectation for being a committee person on this organization is. You just don't know that. And so it's critical that your board members, and really any volunteer, but especially your board members who are making a commitment to the longevity of your organization, that they are very clear in what their expectations are. And to be honest, if I knew that there was an organization that had a job description with the very clear expectations, I would go, you know what, I'm a lot more likely to volunteer because this organization knows what they're doing. They know what they need. And so I have a sort of a guide map to work in. So it shows that you know what you're doing. And they put a little bit more stock, a little bit more faith in your organization. But secondly, it also helps you if there's a major issue with the board member that hasn't been doing their job, for you to say, you know, here were the expectations and we see that you're not meeting these, you know, is there something that we can do to help you, or do you need to just bow out and let somebody else do this job? So it's really important to write job descriptions for your board members. And it's also helpful if they believe in your mission. That's sort of a no-brainer, but that should be stated pretty clearly in your expectations and job description. And it also helps them to understand that they're part of a larger process and a bigger vision. So those are just some key takeaways for board members or officers, or I know they might have different names for the different organizations. Every volunteer, whether they're a board member, they're a one-time volunteer, there's somebody who you can always count on to do this task, no matter who it is or what it is they're doing, it's so critical that you explain to them that they're part of something and that you are counting on them. If people begin to understand that, like I said earlier, you know, the world depends on them, the whole world rides on your volunteerism. If you explain that, and that they're a part of something larger, and they can clearly see what it is that they're contributing to, and they can clearly understand that the success of this vision depends on their participation, they are so much more likely to be involved and continue to stay, and that you can count on them again and again and again. So every volunteer that you have involved with your organization, you need to be sure that they understand how they fit in with the larger mission of the organization, and how, you know, what this micro task that they're doing, how that relates to the bigger process of whatever it is that you're working on. And the number 3 rule of volunteer management is to thank them, and to thank them again and again and again. I've worked with lots of organizations that there have been problems in board members or volunteers feeling like they weren't thanked enough, or they weren't acknowledged enough for their participation. And that really doesn't feel very good when you go out of your way to do something for someone and there's no gratitude in it. And so as the coordinator of volunteers in your organization, you need to be sure to say, well, no, thank you for your help. That also helps you to manage them and keep them coming back for more. So you'll see here that I have thanked them in creative ways. When I sometimes run volunteer offices, when I've done this in the past, we have like a special board that people can put their names on, or different times I've had like different icons. So we had like rock stars, and so people who volunteered for 5 hours got to put their name on a star, and we put it, if they volunteered up to 5 hours, they were I can't remember exactly who our different levels of rock stars were, but like at the top you were like in the Beatles club because they're the biggest band, and then like the second one down was like the Beach Boys, right? Like they were stars, but they weren't as big as the Beatles, and then something below it. So each time, whatever it makes sense for your organization, you can kind of do something like that where you're playing with something that people get excited about, and it's silly and it's fun, right? So like with the rock stars, like this is unpopular opinion here, but I really hate Phil Collins. I don't like Phil Collins music at all. So like for me, I would put like, Phil Collins at the very bottom. And so it was a silly thing that would encourage people to move up. You're like, you don't want to be in the Phil Collins, category. You want to be in the Beach Boys or with the Beatles up there or something like that. So it's something that's kind of fun and kind of silly, but it also encourages that volunteerism. So it's something that is creative and different. Other volunteer offices that I've helped set up have done things where, like, each week they'll have a volunteer that it's like a star volunteer. This person did this really great thing, and we're going to highlight them this week. And then people, sort of, whether they know it or not, they will start to, they'll say, oh man, I want to be featured this week. And so they'll put in a few extra hours just to become like the featured volunteer for that week or whatever. So there's different ways that you might be able to do that. When I've had to set this up virtually, we've just sent out, a feature in our weekly newsletter. It's like, look who are, featured volunteers for this week, and here's a little bit about them. So it just goes out with something we're already putting out. And if you have ongoing programs, ongoing things that you're doing, always ask them to sign up for the next project or the next program or event before they leave. It's a lot easier when you're looking them in the face and saying, hey, will we see you next Wednesday for the same thing? For them to say yes to that when they're already in front of you, rather than you having to, play phone tag and chase them down and continue to try to find them and get them to sign up for next week. Always demonstrate their worth. Again, whenever some creative and fun ways to do that. Show them show them the process that they're in their part in it. Oh, that sentence is all kinds of messed up. It should be show them the process and I used the wrong part in it. Excuse me. And it's okay to hold them accountable. We went over some things like that before. So, if they're 30 minutes late, call them up, say, what's going on? We really, we're counting on you for this. When can we get you to come back and help out with that? So just as we finish up here, here's just a couple of tips and tricks. Always smile, always exude happiness and excitement about the project. Stay positive in your work with volunteers. As you're asking them to get involved, as you're training them, as you're thanking them, this is hard work, it's fun work, but it's important that you stay positive because you want your volunteers to feel good. And when they come into contact with your organization, you want them to feel good about that and about being with you, being with your organization. Sometimes you kind of feel like a cartoon with it. I've worked in volunteer offices where some people are like, Lindy, I just don't you're just silly. You're just silly. Well, you know what? I'm also a really effective volunteer coordinator. People love it when they are in contact with someone who just is excited about what they're doing. And so it's a good thing. It's okay to be doing those things, just to smile and make people feel really welcome. The whole world depends on them being there. So with that, I'm going to, I kind of had really good timing here. I thought this was going to be a little bit of a shorter one, but I always think that. So I know we just have a few people here as our participants and our attendees. I'm going to obviously open it up for any questions. Pop them in the chat and the Q&A. I don't see any, but while we wait for those, Abraham, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this?
No, just that we really appreciate your presentation today, Lindy. That was awesome. That's really great information. I've been on both sides of this. I've been a volunteer and I've also been a volunteer coordinator. So, I definitely appreciate all of that information. It is kind of hard sometimes, you don't really, if you don't know the expectations, people aren't on the same page. So thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate it. And also for our participants, we are going to put this presentation on the Community and Cultural Outreach YouTube channel. So it will be on there shortly. But once again, Lindy, I appreciate it.
Wow, thank you. And Mary, that's awesome. She just popped here in the chat that she was the artistic director for the Illinois Ballet, which must have been really awesome. That sounds like a great position. I'd love to hear more about that. And like she said, we couldn't have done, they couldn't have done their work if it weren't for the great board and the volunteers. And yeah, so Mary, you totally understand the importance of having great volunteers, and an organization like the Illinois Ballet, sort of the bigger the organization, the more you rely on those volunteers in the day to day, and to put on those events. So the materials that I put together were just sort of based off of my information, or what I've gathered in doing volunteer work too. So you totally understand. So thank you so much, Mary, for sharing that. So Jamie and David, if you guys don't have anything else, we'll go ahead and let everybody get back to their busy day. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and Abraham for moderating.